Greeting to all my friends around Southeast Asia. I'm SF, AVP Alliance and Channel of Cloud4C, responsible for Southeast Asia market. Welcome to our Cloud Cost Management webinar. In today's webinar, we are focusing on three main topics: how to tackle the unmanaged cloud growth, simplifying financial complexity, lastly, best practices in cloud cost optimization. Without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. From Microsoft Corp, we have Daniel Feeney, Group Finance Manager responsible for Cloud Economics and Strategic Partnership. Karun Gupta, Finance Head of Enterprise Business from Microsoft India. From Cloud4C, Hitesh Bharadwaj, VP of Sales and Pre-Sales, responsible for APJ market. Saiful Bakhtiar Osman, Head of IT from ASCENT Fund Services, responsible for APAC market, who will be joining us later in the panel discussion. Welcome, gentlemen. Okay, one of our giveaway from this webinar is a free cloud cost optimization assessment. The assessment was developed by our cloud architect, and I'd like to highlight the expected outcome from the assessment. Will help you to identify and uncover saving opportunity, provide guidance on how to cut unnecessary spending by identifying wasted resources, provide guidance to mitigate risks associated with security and compliance. So please take advantage of this assessment and scan the QR code whenever you see it appearing on our slides. Okay? Yeah. So before we start, here are some housekeeping. Please drop all your questions in the chat box. Any technical concern, let us know through chat box as well. Okay, once again, please remember to take the advantage of our assessment program, okay, by scanning the QR code to qualify for free cloud assessment. Great. Okay, now, sharing with you today's agenda. We will start off with Hitesh Bharadwaj, okay, introducing Cloud4C corporate profile, followed by an overall understanding on how Cloud4C are advising our client in cloud cost management. Okay. Daniel and Karun will be presenting on Microsoft Advice and the understanding on cloud economics. After the presentation, we will proceed into the panel discussion.
Thank you. So to start with, we want to give a quick intro of what Cloud4C is. So Cloud4C is operating in 25 countries and 50 plus locations. We've been serving 4,000 enterprise globally, including of 60 of the Fortune 500 companies, some of the top banks across the globe, some of the top car manufacturers, etc. So we've been there helping our customers with their cloud journey. We are application-focused managed services partner. So we have depth and breadth of the experience to help customers across multiple cloud. We do have tier one relationship with Microsoft. We've got panelists as well with Microsoft today to share a lot of best practices about how you can mature your Azure cloud cost optimization practice. Cloud4C is partnered with all the top cloud partners to help customers to make the right decisions. Moving on. We also are awarded recently in 2020 by Microsoft as a Partner of the Year in Middle East in Qatar. We are consistently recognized as a leading SAP services partner globally. And we were also awarded by Infosys Finacle for our practices around the banking and many other credentials. As you can see on the screen, we're serving 20 of the Fortune 100 customers globally. Okay, with that, we want to start this with a thought process of this is a survey by IDC in 2020 about the cloud computing state of affair. This asks about top 5 challenges of the CXOs. And as you can see, the number one challenge that the CXO has brought up is controlling the cloud cost. So if you find it challenging, don't consider that you are alone. This is a challenge across the globe. The second most common challenge was data privacy and security, and I think it's a usual suspect. Moving on, you will see security and governance as a common pattern. So what is common between the controlling cloud cost and security? We found globally that many times the security initiatives are underfunded. I mean, if you had more budget to spend to improve your security, it's always going to mitigate some of the risk. And as we see, and we'll find in the next stage, next slide, if you look at the cloud waste, it is amazing to see how $26 billion globally is being waste. That means if this fund was saved, even if half of it, and if it was redirected to improve the security posture on the cloud, this will mitigate the top two most common challenges, which actually come under the governance. So that's where it is very important for any organization of any size to consider cloud financial management as a key objective while they drive the innovation by using the power of cloud. So we saw that the survey in 2020 and the response on this, the audience is aligned that is challenging. Now, why cloud operating cost or cloud economics is a challenge? Well, if I put it simply, although the answer is not that simple, but a simple explanation would be cloud is infinitely flexible and it is not one size fit of all, which is a great thing because that means you can make decisions that you make during your cloud journey and while operating in a cloud that affects what is your cloud bill. So what are those decisions? If I take some of the example, um, if we look at the simple view of infrastructure as a service alone, the parameters like sizing of your footprint, for example, the compute and storage, the software licensing, which is about 30 to 40% of your cloud bill. Are you using the programs like Azure Hybrid Benefit, or are you bringing your own licenses, or are you going to use a SPLA license from the marketplace? Are you considering for third-party licenses like Red Hat and SUSE to be BYOL, or are you going to choose as a marketplace image? The decisions that you make in spinning up the new workloads or migrating the existing servers. These are some of the examples. If we expand further, decisions such as, is your workload is a predictable workload, or this is something that is an unpredictable workload? Now these questions matter less in the traditional world, but this becomes a super critical element of the decisions when you're operating or are planning to migrate to cloud. Decisions like if you will be using pay-as-you-go made for a reserved instance. And these are just handful of the list. Some of the best practices you can see on the screen as well. And that's where we see that customer benefit by going through an analysis or an assessment to find out what can be their intermediate, short-term or long-term cloud cost optimization strategy. For the best pricing, you have to have a deliberate consideration, and that has to be specific to the workload that you're talking about. For paying what you consume, of course, it starts with the visibility, a governance that gives you an inside view of what is your current need versus what should be your ideal needs in the cloud. Over provisioning of the resources is one of the most common problem that we've seen across while serving customers across multiple cloud and global locations. Purposefully architecting for the elasticity. I mean, elasticity is a great power that we all admire for the cloud, but you have to be deliberately architecting your solutions to help you save cost by using that elasticity. Example would be not just compute, but if we talk storage, by choosing the right strategy of the right tiering, for example, is your workload requires a hot, cold, or archive storage, mapping your actual need versus your cloud. This is a decision that you make for the new workload or the existing workload. This alone can save a sizable amount on your cloud bills. So hence, that is the reason the cloud economics is not just a unified, a single approach. It's a multi-fold approach where you have to take some conscious decisions on the existing workloads and as a practice going forward. If we summarize it under one category, it'll be governance. So you have to have a cost ownership. The departments, the business users, the IT users, they all have to take their share of ownership. You can use the tools such as resource tagging, cross-charging, many other ways to create a visibility. You can use automation and optimization platforms to make sure this is done consistently. You can define budget that will meet your business requirement.
So glad to chat with everyone today. I'm Daniel Feeney. I sit here at Microsoft in corporate. So I'm actually based in the West Coast of the US. So joining you for my evening time tonight. So great to see everyone. What I'll be talking a little bit about today is how we think about cloud economics and the financial shift that often goes hand in hand with a digital transformation. And so we know that digital transformation can unlock new capabilities and new features and technology for your organization. But oftentimes with that shift comes a required change in some of your financial processes and how you manage the financial side of your IT environment. And so it's important to build a strong relationship between the finance side of your organization and the technology side, because there will be changes not only to your technology, but to things like financial position. How are you accounting for spend today? Are things hitting capital expenditures and operating expenses? And when you move to the cloud, how might dollars shift? How are processes, things like using a PO to purchase a server today, going to shift when you move to a cloud model? You're no longer using POs, you're actually spending as you go. And so these fundamental shifts require a change, and they require you to understand some important cloud cost management and cloud cost optimization features. Additionally, when we think about the cloud, we think about some of the benefits that it can unlock. So with some of the changes from a financial perspective, come opportunities. And so we've broken these down into two core areas. We have technical and financial opportunity areas. From a technical perspective, we tend to think of things like scalability and availability. Your ability to scale up your capacity, let's say going from 1,000 servers to 10,000 servers, really in the blink of an eye. You can shift and increase capacity, and then when you're done, when you no longer need it, give that back. So your ability to meet peak demand and then scale down when you no longer need that capacity provides an economic advantage in addition to a technical advantage. The ability to have high availability systems also drives an advantage in the cloud because you can utilize Microsoft's global data centers in order to achieve that availability without significant upfront capital investment. When we think about some of the financial benefits as well, the shift over to an OpEx pricing model moves away from some of those upfront spend that require a balance sheet investment. When you move to the cloud, you spend over time. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, with things like reserved instance billing models, you can achieve price savings and discounts, even utilizing pay over time models where you're spending later and not spending upfront. You're reducing your data center footprint as well as gaining new productivity from staff. In opposition to having to manage everything manually, you can start utilizing technologies like platform as a service to really improve the ability of your organization to use automation. When we think about the cloud and some of these technology advantages, one of the slides I really love to talk about, because I think it really narrows in on how the cloud helps you from an elasticity perspective, is this chart. I think of the gray box as kind of a server on premise or a number of servers on premise. And we can think of that as something you just have provisioned. It's running 24/7. And so on premise, from an economics perspective, we typically think there's usually an amount of capacity that's just sitting idle because we had to pre-buy in case workload demand increased. Maybe we thought the application was going to require 16 cores, it required 8. So there's a portion of capacity when you move to the cloud, you want to make sure you're right sizing. Just because you use 16 cores on premise doesn't mean you need that in the cloud. And so taking a cost optimization opportunity to right size that capacity is critical. At the next layer, when we think about the change in behavior of applications, there may be times in a non-premise environment where you have a peak of capacity that you need. Maybe it's a holiday period where you have particularly high demand. And so you need to provision those servers for that peak usage. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week or a month, but your servers are bought for that single peak. In a cloud-based model, you can use the pay-as-you-go billing model and elasticity to scale up as well as scale back down. And then when we look at very consistently running workloads, you can utilize things like reserved instance billing models in order to achieve a much lower price point. A 3-year reserved instance billing model can go anywhere from a 50 to a 70% discount off of the pay-as-you-go pricing. And it includes some level of flexibility. So you can actually exchange reserved instances for different families or regions. So you're not locked into the same family or even the same region, and you can pay for it over time, not just upfront. So even with that discount, you still preserve a high degree of flexibility and benefit. When we think about some of the other shift in a cloud from a financial perspective, We also think about the shift in how you pay for capacity. On-prem, you're typically provisioning assets via a capital model. Now, we can't give accounting guidance, but generally, I think many customers will notice some level of shift from capital models over to operating expense models, which requires an understanding of how you're going to shift budgets and processes to manage that spend slightly differently. Now, the cloud can give you more predictability. You're no longer having 1 or 4 year or 4 to 5 year capital refresh cycles. You're having spend that's monthly and it's consistently happening, as opposed to that capital refresh cycle. When we think about certain KPI, things like EBITDA, for example, also experience a shift going from on-prem to cloud. EBITDA is operating profit, but you add back depreciation and amortization. And so when you move from on-prem to cloud, you may experience some shift to that KPI, but it's important to remember when you're thinking about kind of the economics of the cloud to focus on the impact to cash flow and the benefit from a cash flow perspective that we think the cloud can potentially provide. So with that, I'll hand it over to Karun, who will dive a little deeper on some of those business case transitions going from on-prem to the cloud.
Thank you, Daniel. With that, I will just move on to thank you. So hello, everyone, and thank you for taking time out to be with us today. I will just pick up from where Daniel left. Cloud consideration is a very important decision for us as an organization. So what I will cover over the course of next few minutes is how do we evaluate the business case and what are the practical things that we need to take into consideration once we evaluate the business case to move to the cloud. So typically when you make a move to the cloud, what you envision is how is the total cost of ownership is going to be. So typically when we move to the cloud, there is a natural transition from the CapEx type of an environment to an OpEx type of an environment. So what you see on the slide here is that as you make the movement to the cloud, your CapEx expenditure will start to come down because you will not more invest any further in your on-premise data centers. A significant portion of your on-premise cost will get subsumed and taken over by the cloud cost, which is the Azure cost in this particular case. So you see the graph from a CapEx perspective and the on-prem OpEx, which are the things like electricity, other on-prem licenses or rent, etc., that will start to come down because you have started to wind down on the on-premise environment. But that cost will get compensated with the Azure component, which is the cloud cost over a period of time. But the beauty about this total cost of ownership comparison between on-premise and cloud is the cost optimization and the savings that you could have over a period of time. The red dotted line on the top is if you continue on your status quo as on-premise environment, then typically what is the cost that you will continue to incur over a period of time. And then of course, with an escalation and price rise, this cost will continue to go up. But if you move to a more optimized cloud environment, you will start to see that benefit and the cost curve will start to come down. And what you see in the middle is the true value that the cloud or Azure can bring it for you as you take a decision to move to the cloud. So this is the business evaluation where we compare the total cost of ownership between the on-premise environment and if move to the cloud, what's the value prop that we are really going to get and how it is really going to help us financially is an important consideration that CFOs or the CIOs of an organization do take into consideration. So just moving on to the next slide. Let me just try. Yeah, thank you. So implementation of the business case, I think, is equally critical. There are certain things that we need to take into consideration as we look at the business case. I think critically, you need to evaluate all your on-premise costs today. So do you really need to acquire that much on-premise assets as you move to the cloud environment is an important consideration that you need to have. The right sizing and the optimization depending on the capacity and compute is important because as you take a decision to move to the cloud, there is a very critical need for you to really clean up and do the right sizing in terms of the VMs and in terms of the capacity that you would need. It is a continuous cost optimization. You will have to continue to evaluate that. How do you continue to save cost? How do you continue to move to a more optimized environment? Things like reserved instance or pay-you-go provide you all of those flexibilities as you really go along. Resource tagging is important because as you move to the cloud, you really need to map your resources accordingly in a cloud environment versus what you were doing in an on-premise environment. The beauty of the cloud is it provides you multiple cloud native billing models, which provides all the flexibility of how do you want to pay, how do you want to really construct it. So there is no longer blocking of capital upfront, but you can have that more predictable billing models as you could have in the cloud environment. And of course, then on top of that is all the Azure hybrid benefits that we will get as a result. So what is very important is that when you evaluate or implement a business case, there are multiple things that we need to take into consideration. And some of these are the practical things that we have seen as we have worked with the clients all across the world. Yeah, so just building on, I think, from a Microsoft standpoint, Microsoft provides a lot of solutions which really helps you optimize your environment continuously and regularly as you move along. We have the tools like Azure Cost Management, which really helps you and understand the forecast, your OPEX and how it is really going to be, so that from a provisioning perspective or from a cash flow or predictability perspective, you're able to predict to an element of certainty that what is the cloud cost is going to be. So there is a tool on Azure Cost Management that Microsoft does provide. Then there is a continuous optimization of the workloads. Even when you have moved to the cloud, I think you will continue to evaluate the workloads as you really need to have. So we have the things like Azure Advisor and the framework and Azure Hybrid Benefits, which are multiple solutions and tools which are available to the customers across the world to continue to optimize that environment and continue to save cost as they move to the cloud. And last but not the least is, of course, on controlling your costs. So we do have the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, and we also have the Azure policies, which really help you implement the cost controls. And in the process, just make sure that you're able to continuously optimize your cost and control your cost as you move to a more cloud environment. So there is a good repertoire of resources and the tools which are available from Microsoft side, which really helps us evaluate and do the continuous cost optimization as we move to the cloud journey.
Welcome back, gentlemen. Okay, joining the panel discussion today is Saiful Bakhtiar Osman, Head of IT from ASCENT Fund Services. Welcome, Saiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the last 30 minutes, we have been hearing cost optimization, cost management, cloud economics, presented by Hitesh, Daniel, and Karun. I can see our audience are very attentive. I have a few questions in hand, and I hope the panelists can address the concern, the curiosity, and maybe provide a few pointers to help them to position their cloud costs to the CFO, to their CFO. Okay, so let's start the panel discussion. Okay, Saiful, yeah,
Yes.
You have started the journey to the cloud. Okay, is there any learning from it which will be relevant to others around cost? Over to you, Saiful.
Thanks, SF. Okay, actually, we are still new in cloud. We started in July 2020. So basically now we are currently running 100% on Azure Cloud. So about the cost saving, I can share what type of optimization then that we look for before or the considerations before we decide to go to cloud. So basically, this whole idea comes from the management direction, because the management wants to have a few objectives met. So among the objectives, well, first of all, is to improve the operational efficiency. And number two is to have the ability to reach out to clients across geographical boundaries. And number three is to become the disruptor of traditional financial services and to become the initiator of the niche market. That is our strength by leveraging on the technology. So based on this direction from management, so we have presented to management, and they agree that going to cloud will be, in the long run, will be more cost effective and efficient. So the main consideration that if you focus on is one is cost avoidance and also business agility. So in terms of cost avoidance, one, we need to consider if we want to open a new office in another country. So there are a few things that we need to consider, and cost avoidance comes in terms of one, consider to invest in hardware and software for each country that we set up. That will be very much costly. To invest every time we want to open office, we need to invest in the hardware and software. Number two is creating new data transfer policies, because every country, they have their own localization law, and with the GDPR comes with the country's data sovereignty. And number three is hiring additional staff just to oversee the compliance are being met. So this is one thing. So every country, we need to have a staff to oversee all this. And number four, that one still doesn't include the future cost, the expenses of support renewals, hardware refresh, maintaining physical database in all this countryside. That is one of the our consideration. That's why moving to cloud is the best decision that we think. Where hence we started with the project. Number two, in terms of business agility. So in terms of business agility is the ease of setting up offices in Asia Pacific. So now we are 100% ready. So even now, as we speak, we are opening a new office in Taiwan. So even though the office is not there yet, but we already hired the managing director. So because of the onboarding, he's already on cloud. So he can do all the marketing before the office setup is ready. So while doing that, he has the convenience, he has the flexibility to go around to introduce the company while our HR is doing the hiring for his team in Taiwan. So that's the benefit. Number two is ensures the staff well-being. So staff well-being moving like the pandemic. So working from home or working from office, there's no problem for us, because as long as there's internet connection, that's where we go, because we are already 100% on cloud. And number three is ensures data availability. So in terms of data availability, we have the Microsoft team here. They can vouch for us, because in terms of data availability, we subscribe to this geo redundancy storage, whereby if in the Singapore region, our company is Singapore, so every data that we backup every day is replicated into 3 more data centers. So whenever anything happens to my data center that is hosting our data, so I still have a copies in 2 more data centers in Singapore region, which is geographically different. So that ensures the high availability of our data. And last but not least, we are proud to say that we are currently fully on cloud, and business continuity is also on cloud. So what happens is that our main connectivity is using Citrix, while our secondary connectivity is utilizing the Windows virtual desktop WVD. So when anything happens to the Citrix, which is hosted in Singapore region, not likely. So if that the worst case scenario do happen, so the staff will immediately change to WVD, accessing our servers through WVD. And WVD is hosted in our servers in Azure servers in Japan region. That's how the business continuity involve the geographical. From if anything happened, like the data center in Singapore totally wiped out, we're still good, because they are shifting our operations to Japan. Thanks, SF.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, it's always good that you're in the cloud, and you are able to to continue and share the learning with others. Okay. All right. There are a few similar questions from the chat box. Okay. Stressing on the impact of cost optimization during the pandemic. Okay. I'd like to invite Hitesh. Okay. Hitesh, can you share with us, as a service provider, what is your client's view on this matter?
Can you repeat the question, Asif? Sorry, couldn't get that.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just saying that, there are a few similar questions from the chat box, okay, stressing on the impact of cost optimization during the pandemic itself, right?
I see.
Okay, so as a service provider, okay, what is your client's view, okay, on this matter?
Understand. Thank you so much. So that's a great question, and it's very unfortunate to be in the pandemic, but it has definitely accelerated the digital transformation across the globe. We've seen customers, aggressively approaching, throughout the pandemic to facilitate certain business needs that cloud offers. For example, the working from home, and accelerated deployment of virtual desktops, etc., VDI solutions, and many other initiatives around going digital. So in the pace of adoption, it's obviously the KPIs and the driver were different than the cost optimization itself, right? So it's an exercise that we have been helping customers globally who actually, got into the cloud in a very aggressive fashion, but now finding it difficult to manage the cost across multiple cloud. So we as a service providers, do assessment for the customers and find the low-hanging fruits as to where they can optimize the spend overall on an immediate basis, and advising on long-term, not just on the cost, but the other best practices such as security, etc., which might not be the priority as they started their cloud, accelerated cloud adoption, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Hitesh, for sharing. From your client's view. Okay, all right. We have another question. The next question is actually from Daniel and Karun. Okay, the question sounds like this. Okay, they say cost of cloud has the same concept of electricity consumption. So how does CFO these days manage these new changes? Okay, over to Daniel and followed by Karun.
Thanks,
Thank you.
SF. Yeah, I love that analogy because really the core of cloud consumption is kind of a P times Q equation, which is you pay for what you're using. So your quantity is not just the number of servers or the number of cores anymore. It is the number of cores and the number of servers that you have times the number of hours you're using them. And so just like electricity, when you turn your servers on, you're being charged for it. And when you turn them back off, you're not spending on it. And so in a lot of scenarios, that's really valuable, right? You no longer need to keep resources running. It's like, within a house, if you keep your lights on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're going to have a higher energy bill. And most people would view that as inefficient, right? But the reality is, and one of the things you'll see when you move to a cloud-based environment is, when you just leave your lights on 24/7, it's a very predictable number. You'll know the same bill every month because you have it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That electricity bill is not changing. When you move to a cloud-based model, you're going to see changes over time. And so it's a really valuable thing, but it's something you have to better predict. And so understanding when your business may have peaks in demand and when it might have decreases in demand can help you better predict what future spend may look like. But one of the really critical things of moving to a more elastic model that allows you to turn on and off is setting strong controls and strong governance policies. And a lot of the topics you've heard today already, things like resource tagging, help you control costs and budget at a more granular level so you can hold teams accountable. Because the reality is you're going from a purchase order type model where you're buying servers ahead of time to one where you're paying a monthly bill based upon how much you're using. And so that increased flexibility and agility is an advantage. Let's not pretend like it's not an advantage, but it's a risk as well. And so it's a risk that will provide opportunity, but you need to manage it. And so things like resource tagging, things like allocating costs, holding budgets accountable, and really tracking the economics over time and doing continuous real-time cost management is an absolutely critical step, not just for your technical organization, but for your finance organization as well. And so when you're thinking about cloud, cost management, FinOps, a lot of these words that are thrown around, it's really about bringing finance and technology teams together and working closely with partners to make sure you're establishing those strong capabilities.
Yep, no, I think thanks, Daniel. I think Daniel covered it very well. So just an additional point on top of that, I think this analogy makes perfect sense in today's world. So just to give you another example, imagine you have to set up an electricity unit on your own, right? So I think the whole benefit of the cloud comes in because you don't have to spend that much investment today, but you just pay for the usage. So if all of we are working from home or offices, we have an electricity consumption bill that comes every week or every month, depending on how our consumption is. And then over a period of time, if the consumption goes up, we are able to do certain optimizations by saving electricity or whatever we really want to do to bring it up and down. So this is a great analogy. It is the fundamental to the benefits or the financial benefits that the cloud transformation brings in, because it gives more predictability, more certainty, and then it gives you an ability to manage and scale it up and down depending on the consumption, rather than making the big $1 million of capex investments upfront, and you end up wasting a lot of capacity from the over provisioning part.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel and Karun. Okay, I'm sure friends who are trying to convince the CFO, okay, will have taken down some valuable points. Okay, and if you need any help, please do call us. Okay. All right. So the next question will be, when do organizations conduct cloud cost optimization? Is it before or after the cloud journey? Okay, we'll invite 4 of the panelists, okay, to share their point of view. So we'll start off with Saiful, Daniel, Karun, and Hitesh to end it. Okay. Yeah. Over to you, Saiful, to start.
Okay. Thanks, SF. Okay. As mentioned by Daniel and also Karun, there's no one size solution that fits all. In our case, what we do is that currently for the cost management, we have this quarterly review of cloud utilization meeting. So during this meeting, the team will present the overall utilization and the performance of the past 3 months, and to propose cost saving to the management. So one of the key savings is that would impact the spending is to identify and delete the orphan resources. So this is very important, because in cloud everything is chargeable. So you really need to understand your infrastructure, your resource, what is currently being used, what is not being used. So like in our case, we have this OS hard disk snapshot of the NetScaler for our Citrix that we use during Citrix upgrade project. So and we allocate about 20 gig. This is the standard HDD. So we also have unused 127 gig of premium SSD VHD, and also virtual IP that we can remove. So this removal of the open resources impacted the overall subscription with monthly saving of how much, and this is ongoing. So this is one of how we treat the cost management, how we improve in terms of doing optimize our spending and also the utilization. Number 2 is that we also review the overall infra utilization and the forecast, so that we can lock better pricing and discounts. So by leveraging this Azure Reserve instance, the Azure RI, so we can lock the resources for 1 to 3 years upfront. So as opposed to the pay-as-you-go approach, so we prefer this one because we know already that for this virtual machine we are going to use for continuously. So why not we just cap it, lock it, leverage the big discounts that are given by Microsoft, and we were able to get more discounts and also improve in terms of our spending. And what I can say is that nothing is carved in stone. The beauty of cloud is that is the flexibility of scaling up and scaling down your resources. So as opposed to the traditional approach, SSF.
Okay, thank you, Saiful. Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I think cloud cost optimization has to happen in 2 waves. I view it as both before and after, which is kind of an easy way out answer, I know, but I'll touch a little bit on why for both. I think when we're thinking about before migration, before you move over, a lot of times you're building out a business case. You're trying to create a justification framework to convince a CFO or an executive audience of the value of moving to the cloud. And so I've seen a couple of questions in the chat window around whether the cloud, reduces and impact. And I think the reality is it's something you have to assess. And the more you're able to optimize pre-moving to the cloud, the better chance you'll have of driving savings and opportunity. And so when I'm looking and working with customers, the first thing we'll look at is an assessment, for example, and we'll see very low CPU utilizations. And so when we're building out a plan to move to the cloud and we're building a journey out, we want to make sure our projections are based upon a right-sized amount of capacity. And we'll look at that same capacity and we'll say, okay, what's the footprint look like? Do my prod environments require 24/7 type usage? If that's the case, then maybe reserved instances will be the billing model we end up choosing. Can I be elastic with that capacity? Maybe for my dev test environments, I only need to run them, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's further opportunity so that when you're trying to convince the CFO, you can say, hey, I don't actually need, 100 servers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I need 50 servers. I need those 50 servers 24/7, but I'll use reserved instances. The other 50 I'll use for 8 hours, 5 days a week, and then I don't need the capacity on nights and weekends. That pre-journey kind of analysis can help you drive an optimized and hopefully higher savings case to help justify that move. But once you move to the after the fact case, you need to kind of implement that and continuously cost optimize. On the Azure side, we have things like Azure Advisor that help you track recommendations for things like right sizing, reserved instance capacity. And so that ability to kind of look at your planning from the front end before you move, but then continue to track that spend, continue to look at recommendations, and make sure you're tagging resources and holding teams accountable. It's critical on both sides. So keep your cost optimization as part of your planning phase, but then don't let it fall by the wayside when you go into execution mode, because planning and execution requires a high level of diligence on both sides from my perspective.
Yeah, so I think I completely echo with what Daniel said. I think the whole fact that we are talking cost optimization is because of cloud, because cloud gives us the flexibility to look at the cost elements and how we can really manage them better. I think there is a lot of inflexibility in an on-premise or a CapEx type of an environment because there are a lot of upfront capital costs which are involved. But the beauty of the cloud is that you get to define those elements. You look at your consumption, you look at the peaks and the normal capacity that you need to have, and it gives you a continuous opportunity from a cost management perspective. So my short answer to that would be, as Daniel said, it is a continuous evaluation that you could do both during the business case implementation and also subsequently. And there are multiple tools and resources which are available from Microsoft side as well, which can help customers continuously optimize the cost.
Yeah, thank you, Karun. Yeah, Hitesh.
Actually, thanks, SF. I think this is pretty interesting question, and I'm sure the customer would relate to that. That many times it is dictated by where you are in your cloud journey. Many of the cloud optimization initiatives are reactive in nature because when they find it challenging, they start engaging with the partners and taking help that cloud cost is a problem. Versus there are customers who actually take enough time to do the business case, but they're not able to get the momentum of the innovation. They're not able to support the business initiative because they are taking a lot of time to make decisions about the TCO, etc. So firstly, this is not a point in time exercise. You cannot always say by doing once you have your optimized cloud environment, because cloud is agile, it's flexible, it's changing, and that's the power that is to you. So that means it has to be an ongoing exercise. Yeah, so there has to be a cloud cost optimization as an ongoing exercise. One. Second thing, we have been into scenario in the practical world where the customer comes to us, and I remember, just not long ago, a customer wanted to exit their data center given the contract was expiring pretty soon, and they had to get their 500 servers running in Azure as soon as possible, right? So in that case, you'd not go to the extreme of the optimization strategy because then you lose the runway and the time to get into the cloud. So your priority becomes that migration has to happen faster. So you take more of decisions around that. But at the same time, the customer thought, given the 2 months runway of 500 VM, they may not be able to optimize anything. But with our expertise, because it's a specific expertise that is required when you architect the solution. And if for example, our team has been doing it for so many customers globally, we can orchestrate a lot of things. We can use the power of something like Terraforms, etc., by putting that provisioning hygiene and getting the tagging, etc., baked into the process, etc. So having an expertise definitely help. Yes, the priority comes from why are you moving into the cloud at what time, but there are always things that you can do pre-moving. Right sizing, as we heard, it may sound a complex process, but there are tools which gives you visibility enough to make some right decision. And again, cloud has flexibility, you can change it, right? So there are pre-migration strategies and things that we must advocate the customer. At the same time, ongoing, and there may be different exercise that you do. Before moving, you make a decision about your cloud consumption, your licensing, etc. Are you going to use the hybrid benefit, etc. But as you are running in the cloud, it's more of operational. Who's accountable for what resource group, who's going to maintain the tagging, what is the chargeback mechanism, what is point in time checks to make sure people are abiding to the accountability that they should. So there are certain different activities, but you do it as ongoing if it is makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So we have advice, we have experience, and we have the tools. Yes, let's do before and after and not be too complacent when you're in the cloud, right? Okay. All right. Yes, I have another question from the audience. Okay. And this audience is very new to cloud. Okay. And he would like to know if security should be part of cost optimization. All right, he further elaborate and say that this question is asked because because he wants to highlight to his CFO not to look at cost alone, but on the overall. Okay, for this question, can I invite Saiful and Hitesh to share your point of view? Saiful, can you start?
Sure. Thanks, F. Okay, for the security, it should be part and parcel of the overall planning that we have. So it must be included in the cloud planning. So if you're already on cloud, then you should include this security from day one to be considered and to be as a business case to submit to your CFOs and to your management. So this is why, because it also depends on the type of cloud services that you engage. Like we have a few cloud service model. We have the platform as a service. We have the software as a service. So like software as a service, I can safely say that about 80% of the IT security would be handled by the service provider, because mostly all these software services is something that off the shelf. So we do a minor customization only on our side so that it fits. But in terms of security, it will be handled by the service provider. It's the responsibility of the service provider. And the 20% is handled by us. There's no such thing as going to cloud, the 100% will be handled by the service provider. No. Like for the platform as a service, like currently we are on Azure. The platform itself is very secure. So, but in terms of the managing the servers, we have our VM servers, all the security, managing the traffic, everything, the security, the data sample, everything is under our responsibilities. And shortly, my answer is yes. You should advise your CFO that this security should be accounted for this overall cloud spending, and not to be excluded. So it should be come up as one cost, because whenever even we manage in-house, also on-site, on-prem, so we still have to have security. It's not something to be treated as differently. It comes together. Wherever we hosted, whether on-prem or cloud, security is essential. It's not something that to be compromised. That is my view, SF.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Hitesh, can I invite you to share your point of view as well?
Sure, SF. So I'll share a different dynamics. There are, firstly, if I look at the similarities of these two topics, although there are two different topics, security and cost optimization, right? There are customers that we interact in day out who thinks cost is a driving factor to get into the cloud. And there are customers who want to improve their security posture by adopting the cloud native security tools like Sentinel, Azure Security Center, things that they can just plug into the environment and still get the better security. But at the same time, there are customers who are operating in the cloud, thinks that cloud cost is a challenge and security in cloud is a challenge, right? So if you look at this, the both, there's a skill gap. Most of the time you can do your cost optimization, making right decisions. You can do a lot of security enhancement. Security used to be a blocker, but now with cloud brings so many power to the CXOs to improve their security, right? So making the right skill set investment, by the partnership or by other means makes the difference between both of the areas. Now, what can be an interlink or common factor between these two is that everybody wants to be a better security posture. Like you won't find a customer who says that I don't care about the security. Everybody wants to make sure their data is safe, their obligations are met, etc. Many times the constraint is always about the budget, right? They do a risk assessment, they find the right budget of how much amount they can spend to make sure the data and the governance around the security is implemented. So how do you overcome such constraint if you want to enhance your security? Is you look for the areas by the power of cloud where you can optimize the cost. There would be low hanging fruit where you can actually get some optimization, and cloud cost optimization does not mean cloud cost savings. You can reinvest that same budget to enhance your security, get better tooling in place. Over to you, SF.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, wait. Okay, let me read from the. Okay, there is one more question. There are quite a lot of questions here, but I'm just taking this because there were a few, audience asking for the same thing. Okay, so this question is actually from two clients that have been in multi-cloud, okay, for 2 to 3 years, okay, and would like to know if there's a standard framework of cost optimization on multi-cloud environment. So I'm thinking, Hitesh, will you be able to share
Yes,
your view on this? Yep.
Yes. So SF, although every cloud platform has different naming convention, that way the tools are deployed, the program works differently, but there's a common framework that we have developed, what we call cloud cost optimization, or operating model for the cloud, right, where we help customers across multi-cloud by using a unified view to the cost span, and running it as a more of a program for them as a service to optimize the overall cost and landscape as a managed services. So we have seen this as a common pattern, particularly with the enterprise customers who have more than one cloud footprints there, and they find it difficult to understand, how the tagging works in one versus the others. How the engineering team find it difficult, because of the skill gap to manage the cost. And most of the time, this is not their priority. The engineering teams are there to innovate and make the use of the cloud, but not, necessarily operating it or delivering the KPI around cost, security, etc. So as a managed services partner, we do see that as a common challenge. And the cloud adoption frameworks, if you use it right, that's how we help our customers by putting these frameworks in practice.